Today we're going to talk about 5G and if it's like dangerous or harmless. There's some, especially in Germany, there's some groups that make quite a big deal out of 5G. So 5G, good or bad? So there's a group in Germany called Diagnose which is warning of the dangers of 5G with higher frequencies, higher data volumes, and they claim that there is scientific evidence for the dangers of 5G, saying pain and sleep deprivation and even cancer can be caused by the new standard. And the question is that true or is that true? And today I'm going to dive a little bit into what really is true, what does the most recent science say on the topic. And I can already spoiler, it's probably not as black and white as you thought. If you came here, you probably thought this was pretty black and white. But yeah, I can already spoiler it's not going to be. So there's going to be two parts into this. The first one is a little bit on the science behind 5G and in general mobile communication. And the second part is going to be a little bit of a literature review on the dangers of mobile communication radiation. So I'm going to go through the research that is available on the topic so you guys don't have to. So I can find the research papers, I can go through the research papers, and I can summarize the papers so you don't have to do all of that. All right, next up. What is 5G? So 5G basically just stands for the 5th generation. What we currently have is 4G, which is also known as LTE. That's the 4th generation of mobile communication. Oops. And the reason why we're getting 5G is because we're going to need large data transmission in very short time, and it's going to be up to 100 times faster than the previous generation. So it's supposed to revolutionize our lifestyle to a large extent, especially if you take examples like autonomous driving. You're going to need a lot of real-time data transmission of all the cars, of all the participants in the traffic. Everybody's going to be hooked up to this. It has to be really quick. It has to be really precise to make sure that there's no accidents. And of course, generally, our data usage is going up in time. So this is going to be interesting. Yes. So it's based on the new telecommunication techniques that I'll go. It's based on new telecommunication techniques, more 5G antennas, and there's going to be other frequencies. One of the things about the new techniques that they're using is currently with a standard, if you have an antenna and it's basically constantly sending out radio waves, what is going to be or is supposed to become better in 5G is that the communication between the antennas and the mobile phones is only supposed to be directional. Instead of, if you think about a normal antenna sending in every direction and sending the signal in every direction, the 5G is supposed to only send into the direction where your phone is currently trying to communicate with the antenna. And it's only supposed to do that when it's required. And yeah, so for 5G to be available everywhere and be useful everywhere, there will be a lot more antennas needed, and because there will be a lot more data volume, but also because of the frequencies that 5G is using. They're higher frequencies, and they're going to be higher, but they're not going to be as far-reaching as the previous ones. And this is basically an introduction to what 5G is. Your cell phone company will tell you that it's the future, that it stands for, love and peace and communication, and I don't know what I'm supposed to call them. They tell you it will cause cancer, but it's neither one of them. So, I think I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the science first, so that if somebody actually comes up to you and says 5G does this and this, or what, so I'm scared of it. If you have Uncle Bob at your Thanksgiving dinner, at your Christmas dinner, or whatever, that is 5G is going to kill us all, and it does this and this. You actually have a scientific background, and you can be the smartass in the family who goes nope, I know this better, this and this and this and this, and I'm going to explain this to you. And I think it's very important to have a little bit of knowledge about these topics because it's very easy for disinformation to spread over the internet, especially Facebook. Next up. So one of the first things I want to talk about is like a basic introduction to radiation. Because one of the topics that people use to scare others of new technologies is they just throw out this buzzword like, oh, mobile radiation, you know? And if you Google radiation, the first thing that you're going to come up with, if you actually Googled it yourself, you're going to come up with like atomic waste and other stuff like this. Just you put radiation into Google, you're going to find a bunch of like radioactive symbols and other dangerous looking images. But that's kind of like a basic misconception about radiation. The electromagnetic radiation is all around us and is omnipresent, and nothing works without it. Nothing works without radiation. And I'm going to show you the electromagnetic spectrum. So on the electromagnetic spectrum, this is all of this is radiation. All of this. All right? And so yeah, all of this is radiation. It goes from all the way from radio waves, microwaves, infrared, also the visible light, of course, ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays. It's all radiation. And as the frequency increases, the energy increases of the electromagnetic waves. And at a certain point, they can become dangerous. So below ultraviolet light, basically from here on out, from this border out all the way to the right, the radiations do not ionize. That means they cannot, which means that if this radiation hits your body or other if this hits your body, it means that the radiation does not have enough energy to really eject like electrons from other matter, damaging it in the process. And if you go beyond ultraviolet, so X-rays and gamma rays, we talk of ionizing radiation. That means the radiation is powerful, that if it hits a matter, it has the potential to kick electrons out of it and damaging the matter that it hits, which that matter could of course be your body in the process, right? And basically, this is dangerous, and that can cause cancer. That's why we don't mess with X-rays and gamma radiation. Like X-rays and gamma radiation, this is stuff we don't mess with. If you ever went to the doctors and got an X-ray, you see that there's certain precautions taken so you don't have this. Or gamma rays, if you work at a nuclear power plant, you're not going to get it right into the reactor. All right, so... But if we look at 5G, or generally, let's take mobile communication, that is in the spectrum of microwaves, which is down here. This is non-ionizing radiation. And the current frequency we're using is 2.6 gigahertz up to 24 or maybe 80 gigahertz, but that will be further in the future. That won't be happening now, you know? So... And sometimes the new frequencies that are used with the new mobile telecommunication is called high frequency radiations, which again, common misconception, sounds dangerous, but that's all relative. It's all relative. It's basically kind of misleading because if you look at the visible light, you see this is even higher frequency than microwaves. So basically, next time you go to the store and you want to buy a light bulb, you can ask for an extremely high frequency radiator, which is just a light bulb in that case. An extremely high frequency radiator can be a light bulb, but nobody is going to sell their light bulbs as that because people are going to be like, the fuck, I'm not buying this, you know? So that's why we don't do this. This can be kind of misleading. You can try order that next time and be a smartass. And then they're going to be like, probably look at you unless you find somebody else. All right. And now I've explained a little bit to you what radio, understanding radiation is and like, why like where we currently have the 5G. I'm gonna have a little bit more of a look into what the claims are for other people. All right, and what of it is true and what of it is not true. Okay, and firstly, the claim is here: mobile data makes people sick. Claim the new frequencies for 5G are dangerous. And hello. Let's dive right into the matter. Even though physicists and biologists among you know that 5G can't do that, all right? We're diving into the matter. Pun intended, whatever. All right, let's dive into how 5G is and why it is or why it is not dangerous. There's generally what I'm talking about now is not exclusive to the newest telecommunication standard, but this is true for all telecommunication. This is even true for the standard we have right now. We basically have two things when we talk about communications and communication radiation. We have two things that we talk about differently. We have the far field, which is basically when you have an antenna sending out in all the directions the radio signal, and like let's say you're in your house here, you're far away from the antenna. It's defined by a ratio between the wavelength and the distance to the emitting place, like whatever sends the radiation. So this is called the far field, and the far field and so on. They're generally not a problem. It's generally agreed upon that the far field has no effect, and then the other thing is called near field near field. I don't know why it auto-corrected that. Excuse me. Is near field exposure. That's something that's close to you. So like if you have the phone next to your head or something like that, or if you have the phone right next to you, you use it for like telecommunication and then like parking access and so on and so on. And the near field exposure is much higher. And for this exposure, there's actually some limitation values. For example, there's some values for why there's some values that are maxed out how much exposure of mobile communication radiation you're supposed to get. And that value is called a SAR value. And that is kind of the value is the limit on the exposure that is allowed for phones. And that SAR value is 2 watts per kilogram. Actually, if you have a phone, if you have your user's manual still there, you can find in your phone's user's manual, you can actually kind of check what radiation exposures you should have from using your phone. It's usually, or what maximum exposing radiation you have from your phone. It's in your manual. They actually have to write it in there. Usually it's something, I don't know, if it's a little bit more, if it's a little bit bigger, it's usually like 1.5 watt per kilograms. And that is the SAR value. But what does it even mean? Why is there such a limit? And previously I said that mobile data, basically microwaves are less harmful than visible light, right? Communication waves are in the wavelengths of visible light, and we said that they are less energetic than visible light. So where's the problem? Why is there even like a limit? If there's like no danger, why would we have to put a limit on it? And the answer to the question is that it's all about intensity. Microwaves can heat up human matter, right? None of you would ever, after all, there's a device called the microwave that some people use to warm their food. Let's not call it cooking unless you're a student, but you put your food in the microwave and it makes it warm. Microwaves use the same frequency as telecommunication. And it's all about the intensity. It's all about how close you are going to be to the radiation. And the same goes kind of for visible light. The SAR value is like a max value for when reception is bad, because if you can, like, what you can see from this is if you have like the phone right next to you, the phone is trying to communicate with the base station, then the closer you are to your device, the more radiation you're going to get. So this ZAR value is basically how much energy is emitted into your body from a close distance. So the ZAR value is like a maximum value for when reception is bad, because, and this is one of the interesting things, because if reception is bad, your phone has to work harder to keep the signal, so it has to send more intensely, and in the process it also, because it sends basically in all the directions, it sends much stronger towards you as well as the person, and you are exposed more to this radiation. But this is like one of the things that's interesting in with the introduction of 5G. Yes, the frequency are going to be higher, but because there's going to be a lot more stations, and 5G is going to be less far-reaching, and there's going to be a lot more antennas, the coverage is supposed to become better everywhere. And if the coverage is better, your phone is going to have to send less strongly to be able to receive a good signal. So there's going to be more far field, which we already said is pretty much undangerous for human, and there might be less near field, but on the other hand, people are probably going to use their phone more. If the internet is faster, people are going to use their phone more. There's going to be more applications. There's maybe like your phone's driving. Not your phone. Your car is driving, and everything's communicating. So actually, intensity might go up, but this is of course a bunch of social factors that we can't really evaluate here right now. But you're kind of expecting something to be similar. All right. So far, this is kind of like the basis on, like, fundamentally, scientifically, why communication waves have like a value of how much you're supposed to be exposed to them at maximum. And there is scientific review of the usage of cell phones. And there's the so-called SAR values for your phone. And I want to dive a little bit into literature review on how communication generally affects your body and if there's any dangers from it. All right, so we're going to dive into a little bit of a literature review on the effects of communication on humans. And luckily, we don't actually have to do too much of this for you. There is tons and tons of places that actually do this for you. There is the EMF portal by the University in Aachen, which is a German university, and they have a portal where they summarize all the scientific reviews of the effects that electromagnetic radiation has on your body. And right now, this has 37,508 publications. And then there's also a German institute that keeps track of electromagnetic radiation and communication radiation on the human body. There's tons of literature out there. I'm going to try to summarize some of the most important ones, and I'm going to try to debunk some of the false claims made by the people that you see in the street that are telling you that 5G gives you cancer. All right, I'm gonna debunk them a little bit, or at least try to, and then reference you a little bit to those reviews, so you guys don't have to. All right. There are some studies. Last year, there was a study that this Diagnose Funk, which is this German organization of people that hate 5G, that they referenced and said, look how bad everything is. But this is one of the key points I kind of want to hammer home for everybody. Not everything that is published in a paper is worth the paper it is written on. You know, there's tons of there can be studies that are not that serious, and therefore it's always important to if you do a literature review, to make sure that the sources that you're reading are serious papers, that they're not fraudulent journals, that the studies are like reproducible and all this kind of stuff. There's hundreds and thousands of studies, and we're kind of just like gonna read or reference to some of the meta studies where they summarize a lot of them. There are multiple large sources where you can find information that I'm going to give you at the end of the talk. All right, so study review. There is a big study by the German Institute for Radiation Control, also known as Bundesamt für Strahlenschutz. It's a German governmental organization. There have been studies that show slight changes in the brain activity when there was a difference in electromagnetic radiation, but that doesn't seem to be linked to changes in health or behavior, making the change like not significant enough to be noticed, but significant enough to be relevant. This is like that is the essence of the study. Okay, I guess I should have shut that off. All right, give me a second. Okay, there we go. Let's go back. And then there's one study that's a little bit funny that I want to tell you about, or I don't know if I can say a little bit funny, but there's one interesting study that I feel like it's that is interesting to reference. Is there was this study from the German Institute for Radiation Control, and what they did is they put up mobile antennas in towns that didn't have any before. All right, and then they sometimes turned, like, they put the antennas into towns where people didn't have like mobile communication antennas, and then they turned them off, and then they turned them on and turned them off and didn't turn them on, but it didn't tell the participants when they turned them on and when they turned them off, right? The participants never knew this, which is like, this is the essence of a blind study, where you don't tell the other person what their circumstances are that they're experiencing, right? So, and those people in this study that had negative effects from the antennas, they didn't only have these when they turned them on, but also when they turned them off. You know, they were talking about sleep disruption and things like this, but they had them as well when the antennas were turned off and when they were turned on. Which the fear, which could lead to the conclusion, and I mean, this isn't, you can't prove this, but the suggestion here could be that is something called the nocebo effect. Okay, the nocebo effect is basically the opposite of the placebo effect, which you probably all have heard about before. The placebo effect is you have positive effects from something that you think is going to help you. For example, you take globally and then you feel better. That's a placebo effect, right? The nocebo effect is if you think you're going to feel worse, you feel worse actually. And that is one of the causes that could be like part of why this bothers people. So the fear of the negative effect that the radiation is going to have on you makes people feel worse because of this effect. And it actually causes like physical pain or sleep deprivation in these people. Like the symptoms people have are not untrue. They do feel them. The cause for them might just not be rational. So there's no evidence on people that call themselves like, there's also been studies on people that call themselves electrosensitive, if there's real. There was another study basically where they had, it's called a provocation study or a protection study, where they tried to test, there's like some people that call themselves electrosensitive, and what they did is basically they just had people in the presence of electromagnetic radiation, whatever. But what they did is they had a bed and then they had like a veil over them. like a canopy over the bed that shielded them from electromagnetic radiation. And then they said that they felt better. They could sleep better and they felt better. And then they replaced the canopy with something that didn't have shielding from electromagnetic radiation. And then they still felt better, right? The people that said slept better regardless, and just making it likely that a lot of these effects that people feel is from the nocebo effect. So scientists to this point say there's so far no evidence that high frequency radiation does of this kind does any real damage, and there's no mechanism known that leads to this. So there's also no scientific mechanism known by which this is the case. For example, with X-rays, we know that they shoot out electrons. And that could be a problem. But scientists also agree that more research on this topic is kind of needed. And I'm going to show you one of the studies that people have actually quoted quite a lot. The people that are like in opposition to 5G have quoted a study a lot. And if these people quote the study to you, it's from the National Toxicology Program of the US Department of Health and Human Services. And this study specifically gets quoted by those people a lot. And this study suggests that there is a direct link between cancer and mobile data radiation, where they radiated mice and rats with cell phone radiation. And the results, the male rats had significantly more heart tumors, and they came to the conclusion because they had more heart tumors that cell phone radiation causes cancer. But, and here's the big but on this study, the radiation that the rats were exposed to was much, much higher than any cell phone exposure would usually be. Also, the whole body of the mice was radiated, which is normally not the case with cell phones. If you call on your cell phone, you usually have it at some point of your body. So you something called it like partial body radiation rather than a full body radiation. One of the explanations is that the rats were basically heated, so you basically microwaved them, since there's no current mechanism known by which mobile radiation would cause cancer in humans. Like, for example, the claim that has been made in connection is that some free radical, like some of the Diagnosefunk people, they say that free radicals are the cause of cancer in humans caused by like cell phone radiation. That's just, there's no mechanism known by which cell phone radiation would make free radicals. That's just nonsense. Also, it's kind of hard to tell, even if this study would be transferable to humans, because high frequency radiation goes kind of less into the body. Would it be like possible for this radiation to reach important organs and such in humans? Also, another thing about the study is the result was not found in mice, only in rats. So, and you're kind of like, why was it only found in rats and not in mice? And then is it transferable to humans? So this is basically kind of why this study is a little bit questionable. But there are some larger studies, and 3 studies here get named a lot. The Interphone study, then the Danish cohort study, and another study called the Million Women study. That's basically what they're reference to. And in none of these large-scale studies, like, could any relation of mobile usage and cancer be established. So I will link those studies at the end, as well as in the description of the video that I'll put up. And for those of you that want to read them themselves, so want to inform themselves a little bit better, these are like 3 of the big meta studies where you can find more information. The only study that could show any connection between or negative consequences was the Interphone study. You had some correlation between brain tumors, glioma, and the people that used their phones in super high frequency. But, yeah. Then again, there was some correlation shown, but the correlation isn't causation. So basically, in terms of long-term studies, there's like no conclusive evidence possible. Some studies are still running, and usually what you would want to have in order to test something like this is you would have to have a randomized control study. And a randomized control study is basically what you have one group that is completely unexposed to radiation, and one group that is exposed to radiation. And that's really difficult to do, especially in long time studies right now, because try to find a group of people that's not exposed to cell phones or mobile communication radiation in any way. And then do that for 15 years. Kind of hard to do. All right? And then on the other hand, what you would have to do to the other group, to the first group wouldn't have to have any communication, and the other one has to be hyper exposed, which is ethically super questionable because, well, if there's even the suggestion that one of the things that you're trying to do might have a positive, negative effect on a human, doing a high exposure study on them is ethically super questionable, right? Because you might be causing real harm to people. It's a lot easier when you do drug studies for medicine, because you give placebo to one group and you're the worst thing that has happened is that they get nothing, and you give them the medication to the other group and you're trying to test if they feel better, and you try to sniff out any side effects. But if the main effect you're trying to study is negative, that's ethically very questionable. That's why these kind of studies are really, really hard to do, because it's super hard to get a control group, and because you're not allowed to hyper-expose people. Because, yeah, not okay. All right. All the studies that I've talked to you about are also on the current frequencies that are used for communication, like the 2.4 gigahertz stuff. It seems logical in principle that all this stuff will also be true for 5G. I just wanted to give you an overview over the literature. So if people come at you with bullshit studies, you can tell them what's wrong about them, or you can tell them what's right about them. But basically everybody agrees that you kind of need more research because you still need long-term studies. And to be completely fair, what's the harm in using a free speech device? Just not having the phone next to your ear all the time, not having the phone on you. What's the harm in this? There's no evidence that this causes any real long-term effects. But as always, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, right? Basically, you can't prove it's not there. So basically, this kind of concludes the whole thing on the effects of 5G on humans. Is basically, it's not going to be more dangerous than the previous frequencies, and the previous frequencies have no there's no scientific evidence that cell phone radiation causes sleep deprivation, cancer, and what was the other one, or any pain in general. There's no evidence of that. And of course, like I said at the start, there's the chance that with the new telecommunication standard, more antennas, better coverage, that actually the amount of energy spent on your body is going to go down with the new frequency. Why are people obsessed with 5G more than 3G or 4G? Is a different wave. The frequencies are going to be higher, but there's really no... from what I've looked up, there's no real reason. I think it's just people being scared of new things. Because there's always going to be people scared of new things, even if there's no logical scientific explanation to them. Next up. But there's one more thing I do want to talk about, and this is why I said this is not everything as black as white as you might have thought about before. There is one more topic that is quite interesting that I found. There's mobile radiation and insects, right? This is one of the things people have brought up on mobile radiation is insects are dying, and while cell phone radiation has only proven to warm the body, right? As we said, it's a microwave. Microwaves warm things. So insects are much smaller, Insects are cold-blooded as well. That means they can't regulate their own body temperature. We regulate our own body temperature, right? We just keep it like nice, warm, and comfy all the time. Whereas insects don't have that ability. And so it kind of makes sense that there could be a more increased effect. There was a German study from 2020 that seemed to be alarming, but when you read it more closely, basically the effects were shown to be either when the exposure was super high, that is probably not, it doesn't happen, like unless like the insects sit directly on an antenna. For example, if the exposure was the SAR value that I named earlier, of 4 watt per kilograms, there were effects, but when the exposure value of like 1.6 watts per kilogram was lower, like you usually have it when you can use your phone, there was like no effects measured. But yeah, some other effects were shown where it could have an effect on the animals, but no link to any like relation to reproductivity of the insects could have been established. So there's more research needed on the topic. There's no conclusive evidence that it does anything to the insects. But I'm just saying this is one of the topics that comes out as well. So yeah. On this German study, if this one specifically gets mentioned to you, what you can say is that there was like lots of criticism on it, and even the author himself said that the data is incomplete and needs to be reproduced, and probably no direct effects could be proven. And what is probably better is this study, this risk to pollinators from anthropogenic electromagnetic radiation, EMR. Generally, you'll find this EMR evidence and knowledge gaps. This is a study conducted in 2019, which is also published in a more well-held journal. It's also always important to make sure that the journal you publish to is a proper journal, and not every journal that you can have a publication in is really worth its salt. So this one is a study that I think is more better to reference. This one says you cannot establish a relation between like the effects of electromagnetic radiation and the reproductivity of insects, but more studies are needed. So definitely on this topic, there seems to be more study needed, and on this topic, it's not as black as white as we've seen before. To let me summarize, finally, there's no link to cancer, sleep deprivation, or others. More research needed, especially for the relation to insects. No reason not to use your Bluetooth device, because like, why not? And on the last topic as well, when interviewed, a German professor at the University of Cologne on the biodiversity on insects says that, I mean, this is interesting, but it's probably a very small factor for the insects themselves, and it's probably smart to first tackle the reduction of living space. For example, through the measures of farming and other reductions of living space that we currently are undertaking for the environment around us. And here are a bunch of sources if you want to inform yourself further, if you want to read the studies yourself, feel free, I'll link them in the description below when I put this video online. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them now. Hope you guys learned a little bit of something on this topic. I know it's completely different from what I usually do on this channel, which is play children's card games. But then again, I think especially one of the things that I mentioned is this, in Germany we have this thing called Diagnose Funk, which is an organization that basically tries to spew a lot of panic around this. And for me, it's important to like tackle misinformation a little bit and get people like updated with a little bit of a scientific background on these topics, and not have people fall for misinformation.